Dollar Archangel.
Okay, is that now better? Hang on. You're not coming through my headphones.
Oh, you're like a little old granny at the computer, aren't you?
Why can't I see you?
You're pointing it the wrong way, Nan.
I'm sure I've connected with these earphones before, and I don't know why it's not doing what I want it to.
You're looking very suave at the minute with the do and the shirt.
With the new do, and the shirt. I'll give you. I'm going to ruin the illusion for you.
Hang on, where's this going?
It looks like a lovely shirt and jumper combo. However,
Oh no, he's one of them cheating ones.
it's cheating.
Oh, absolute scum.
Hashtag Performing Arts with John Ellis Benton. And in this week's episode,
Ben Gray.
Well, first of all, just getting to know about you, really. So, whereabouts on this sacred isle do you hail from?
So born and bred Northampton, so Midlands boy, and it's where I am now at the moment. The only times I've lived away from there was university experience over in Coventry, where you and I first met. Then following 2015, when I graduated, I moved to Reading with my then partner. Then basically I moved back to Northampton, and then literally lockdown happened. So that was interesting to basically be in a new place, but back in my old hometown as all that was happening and going through some own kind of like personal kind of roller coaster sort of stuff. It was all the world was mirroring the chaotic nature of my life, which I thought was quite poetic.
So, what about school? So, obviously, you went to uni to do theatre and professional practice.
Yes.
Where did that start? Did you do it in primary school? Did it start off in secondary school?
I think the performing side of stuff definitely didn't kind of come out in primary school for me as much. It was a secondary school thing. So I enjoyed, obviously, through your early years at secondary. So I did secondary school as opposed to lower, middle, upper. Drama was seen as quite often a bit of a DOS subject. So you only have one lesson a week, and you turn up with all your class, and you do the usual thing of, you go off into groups and you do this project, and 9 times out of 10, you look at all the girls were kind of grouped together, all the boys are grouped together, and you mess around with your mates, and the girls will be sat there crying because it's like, what's going on? Oh, she's pregnant, she's very upset about it, and they're doing that, and like, what's going on over here? From the same source material, somehow there's a fist fight going on, because that's what young boys do. It's like, we're doing acting, fight.
Yeah, you got to choreograph, haven't you? You got to get out your system.
Choreograph yourself a fight. So you do a 6-minute performance, 5 minutes of which is hand-to-hand combat to the death. But yeah, no. So secondary school was kind of like, I enjoyed doing that a lot. I enjoyed the lessons, and so I chose that as an option for my GCSE year. So I think at that point, from the age of about 11 years old, my big plan was I was going to join the Air Force and I was going to be a fighter pilot.
Okay. That's quite a different path to take.
Yeah, no. But what my plan had been, in my beautifully optimistic teenage brain, fighter pilot, do my, you normally get signed up for 12 years minimum service, do that, and come out. I was going to retrain as a drama teacher, because that was two very different things, but two things I was very interested in. I enjoyed drama, so I was going to be a drama teacher. And I did my GCSE, at which point, you realised how much work actually goes into this subject when you actually start taking it seriously. And I think a lot of people that chose to do it as a GCSE then realized how much work was in, and they thought, it's a DOS, you turn up, you do your stuff, you go home. But all the written work inside of it, the practice and the theory and the knowledge behind it, and understanding why certain things are, seeing the productions, kind of having to kind of like write up a paper about, well, why did they choose that set? What does this mean? What does that mean? And kind of looking into the depth of it. That was the point I realized it was a lot more of a complex subject than just kind of the fun of that creating, and kind of like, as our lecturer Glenn Noble used to say, that the play within creating the work.
That was such a good impression. So it was like that was the attractive thing for you. The more work you realised would have to go into it, that sort of drew you more in.
Yeah, I think it was I think younger brains me was kind of like not so much interested in the theory side of it. I wanted to explore and create and have this piece of theatre, this script, and kind of like see where it goes and understand it. And at that point I was really kind of like frustrated with the learning the theory side of it, because I thought, it's theatre, it's a practical subject, I should be doing things. And when we had stuff that was very much a theory-based lesson where you kind of sit down and this is the information and make notes, it's almost like at that point, because there was no kind of creative outlet, I hadn't kind of found my love of writing and kind of creating and doing stuff on my own. I saw kind of these theatre lessons as my outlet for my creativity. And when we weren't making stuff, we were learning about stuff. It kind of frustrated me because I wanted to be doing things.
So this was like completely nurtured through the GCSE process. So was there anyone in your family? Did anyone sort of introduce you to it in your family? Were your mum and dad in Amdram or anything like that?
Not massively. So obviously my eldest brother was quite into, he would always do the school theatre productions. And then my second eldest brother, I believe he did drama. He did quite well within it. He was a very intelligent, kind of very creative kind of lad, but he was also a bit of a troublemaker at school. Okay. He ended up getting kicked out, so he kind of didn't pursue it as a subject. But he was very much, he had the wit and the brains and the creativity there for it. I did do a Amdram production when I was in about year 8, year 9, because my drama teacher actually was part of some local Amdrams, and had asked for some of us that were doing drama that she thought were taking it seriously and would do it, to audition, because they needed a child part. They were doing, it was On Golden Pond, based on a film with Jane and Henry Fonda in it, and it's fishing and not a lot happening with this family in Golden Pond. They needed a 12 or 13-year-old boy to be in the production, and myself and another lad, one of my friends from school, got the part, and we would alternate. And that was my first Amdram production. Was
that your first time in front of an audience?
Well, yeah, I suppose for a certain extent, yeah, a proper audience. That was the first time, because obviously I'd still been performing at school throughout my GCSE stuff, and it was only a small theatre within Northampton, so there couldn't have been more than 100 seats there. But then I'd also been involved in the school shows where it'd be a similar sort of. So yeah, no, that was my first kind of like real outside of school production, as it were. It was just a subject that I felt good at, I felt enthused by, and I wanted to pursue it. And so I did it at GCSE. I did it at A level. Obviously at that point, still with the pursuit to be joining the Air Force as a pilot. So I did maths, I did physics, I did theatre. And then my extra subject, because you had to do 4 subjects at your AS level, was psychology. As it turned out, A levels were a lot more difficult to wing it than GCSEs, and you actually have to do some work.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bitch, isn't it?
My first exam for maths, I got, at the end of that year, what happened was I got a U in my maths, my physics, my psychology, and I got an E at drama, because a lot of the work there, because it was theatre studies, it was a lot more theory based than practical based, and it wasn't at that young tender age of 17, I wasn't quite in a position to kind of actually put the work in necessary. Then I did a little bit of aerospace engineering, still trying to go into that pilot sort of thing, and again the workload there was just massive. We're talking minimum 16-page essays, kind of like every 2 weeks in order to get through everything. And I did about a term of that, and I was just like, I cannot cope with this.
Yeah, that sounds a big workload.
Huge, absolutely huge.
Was that part of the driving force? So what was the thing that turned you from your original trajectory of joining the RAF first? Was that a big contributing factor?
I think because the A levels hadn't gone to plan, and then the aerospace engineering hadn't gone to plan, that for me, I mean, realistically, I could have, kind of jumping forward a bit, I could have done my degree in theatre and gone straight in for the Air Force then. But in my mind, I hadn't done, because they don't care what your degree's in. They just want you to have got some relevant qualifications to prove you're an intelligent person. But in my head, that was the route I needed to take, and therefore I deviated from the path, and so that put that dream to the side for me, and that was no longer an option. I had to take stock and reevaluate, and I was like, well, what else am I going to do? It's like, well, what I love, what I enjoy, which is theatre and creating things. I'm a creative person. Like, that's what I want to do. So I was like, well, why put that on hold and pursue something else when I've struggled and failed a couple of times to kind of do that. Let's just do the passion subject.
Yeah. So from going from this actual career path that you'd planned out for yourself, you've gone around 12 years in advance in your head, and then I'm sure your family knew about this. Is that right?
Yeah, I think when I chose to, I remember very clearly at that point, my parents thought it was, and my mum specifically thought it was a bad decision on my part. But she said to me, and I remember it's the only, I think is that as far as I remember, the only time she's ever said these words, she was just like, I'm just a bit disappointed, but I'm always going to be here to support you.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I bet that came as a bit of a blow.
The only time I feel like I've ever heard my mum say to me that she was disappointed in my actions, and I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, that's a low blow. So it's quite a pivotal moment in your youth.
I that's the point where I kind of left that dream of the Air Force behind, and then I spent the rest of the academic year kind of figuring out what I'm going to do. And then in the next September, that's when I joined the college course, and I did a BTEC level 3 in performance acting.
What college was that?
That was Northampton College, 2 years. Yeah. So I joined slightly older than everyone else, and then obviously straight from that. So I did that 2010 to 2012. And
then that would have been the summer you went to Cov Uni then.
Yeah.
So why Cov Uni? Where else did you look at?
So originally, my original plan had been that I was going to apply for the Oxford School of Drama.
Because you get the 5 options, don't you? When you're applying through UCAS, you get the 5 options, and
No, originally I wasn't going to go through UCAS. I was just going to go like, I've done this, I want to go to drama school. For some reason, I didn't really consider RADA or Central or anything like that. I was thinking kind of something a little bit more local, a little bit like less London based. And I was looking at the price of it because obviously you've got to pay outright.
Yeah.
And I was going to go for Oxford, and then my girlfriend at the time kind of convinced me. She's just like, well, do the UCAS ones as well. In the end, I never even applied for Oxford at that point. I focused on the university choices. So I did Coventry University. I did Manchester Met, because from my understanding at the time, or my research at the time, Manchester Met is basically the closest thing you can get to a proper conservatoire kind of acting school. The downside of going to somewhere like RADA or Central or East 15, a place like that, is you have to pay the fees.
Yeah.
And you can't get a student loan for it. You have to actually pay them money. Whereas if you go through the UCAS scheme, obviously you get your government loan, and then that's pretend debt money that you haven't got to worry about because it comes out of your tax and stuff like that. So you get the education, but you don't actually have to stump up the money at the front, before you even start.
That's the problem with some of these, I don't know, would you say highbrow places? Like RADA, for example. It's sort of catered for those who can already pay out.
There's people, there's a wealth of skill out there there's people that have got places and they've been accepted into these institutions, but they haven't got the money to be able to afford it. And that's the thing, is that's why they're seen as and argued to be quite elitist. I know people like Kenneth Branagh and Judi Dench, and even I can't remember if it was Patrick Stewart, or I think it might have been even Ian McKellen, who kind of learned his craft through working with actors and being part of the touring groups and stuff like that. Like, you join and learn from the others. It's like the issue is there's no kind of route for that to happen. And the only way to get actor training is to pay the £15,000 a year for the 3 years to do this. So even if you've got the ability, there's only so many people that can afford to pay for the opportunity to train with them.
And I don't know how much of a difference this would have made, but just in fact, it was that year that we started uni, I think. It was when the sort of Conservative government had it, because it was 3,000 a year, is that right, for university? And then it suddenly jumped up.
3,006 or 339. But yeah, that was when they raised the tuition fees, and it could be up to 10,000. So I think we were paying about 9,000 something a year.
Yeah.
A lot of people were worried about it. Me personally, I wasn't overly kind of fixated on it, because as far as I was concerned, it was almost like kind of monopoly pretend money. Like, I'm not physically paying that money. I'm just taking a loan out for it from the government, and they only take the money back from me when I earn enough. Like, it's not like I can default on that payment. It's not like a mortgage where if you don't pay it, you lose your home. It's like they can't take the qualification away from me. It's like, oh, sorry, you haven't made your payment. We're just ripping up your degree in front of you. You can't default on it. They take it as a tax from the money you earn. And it actually worked out, I think, better for us, because before, if you earn anything over 15,000, that's when they started taking the money from you.
And now it's over 21, isn't it?
Now it's over 21. And it's like, well, what full-time job doesn't pay you 15,000? You could work minimum wage and be getting more than that. So I could get a degree under the old scheme. I could get a degree and then get a job stacking shelves and be paying back for my degree.
Yeah. So in some ways, it ticked a couple of the helpful boxes there.
Yeah.
So you decided not to go for Oxford or RADA or somewhere like that. What was the selling point of Cov Uni? Out of the ones you did apply for with UCAS, what made you think this is the one I'm going to?
I wanted something that was as close to a full practical course as possible. I wanted something that was very little written work. I wanted something that was get stuck in, up to your elbow, roll your sleeves up to your elbows, in with the dirty, and kind of like do. And from what I saw, there was a few that were kind of like that incorporated kind of radio or TV elements, but kind of Coventry really kind of struck me as the kind of place where it was about the creation. It was about the theatre side of stuff. And having done the course, and the lecturers there were very much part of the do and the create. There was a little bit of script work there. Obviously, Tom, one of the lecturers there, is more kind of leaning towards the script-based stuff. Glenn and Joff, Glenn, the course leader, and Joff, who works there as well, they were very much a devising group sort of thing, and they were all about, they weren't sitting there writing a script and putting it out. They were, let's create something.
Yeah, I remember the thing they always said was get it on its feet.
Yeah, the first rule is write the first draft on its feet, on the stage, and you just get in and just, it was very kind of difficult to kind of get into it, especially kind of like the openness that was needed for the level, for the way they wished to create was just kind of like, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to kind of like be in the performance space and just throw ideas out there. And if it doesn't land, it doesn't matter. We'll move apart, we'll move it to the side and we'll move forward. And it was all about explore not just the work that you're creating, but yourself almost. It was kind of, it felt almost kind of like therapeutic to be just allowing emotions and thoughts and creativity to just flow through and just see what happened.
Yeah, you really had. They pushed you out your comfort zone. You had to be an extrovert. You had to get out, because every day you'd stand in front of your peers, put this out there, and either get it shot down, torn apart, constructive feedback.
And quite often with a hangover.
Oh God, yeah. Campbell Wednesdays, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there were some rough days there, and but it was something you had to do, because it was in the title, weren't it? It was professional practice.
Yeah.
It was, you were practicing to become a professional. That's what they were pushing you to do, and they were forceful with it, but in a good way. Do you find that?
Yeah, I think quite a lot of us, myself included, got a little bit too enamoured with the student lifestyle, during the first year, definitely in the first term, but through quite a lot of the first year. And I think it's just because the nature of the course was so different from what most people's university experience was like. When I started university, my girlfriend at the time, she did classics up in Leeds, and her lecture timetable looked like anywhere from kind of 10 to 15 hours per week, a 2-hour lecture of a day. And then that was the rest of the time was self-study and essay writing and things like that. Our course was, well, you could quite easily do 10 to 12 hours per day.
Yeah, you could easily be there till, 10:30 at night.
Yeah. And as myself and Lisa were through third year, final year, the night before our performance was supposed to start, we were there till 1 in the morning, even though we shouldn't have been doing all our set stuff. Yeah, they didn't check the rooms properly and didn't kick us out. And so at 1 in the morning, we were still there making set. We weren't being quiet. I was using a power drill, but they didn't kick us out. And so when we tried to leave, the alarm went off.
So whoever was like doing the security for that building that night, they were the definition of bad at their job.
Yes, they did the bare minimum. I think they just like got to like 11 o'clock. They're like, well, everyone's out. I'll just lock the doors. But yeah, no, it was just. I've forgotten where it's going before I went off. The hour's working. The hour's working. That was it. I'm with it. I haven't had half a bottle of wine. It's fine.
I didn't want to interrupt you, so I was just like, go on.
Yeah, so obviously your lectures were kind of like 9 to 5 every single day. You might have had kind of like a slightly later morning where you didn't have to be until 10 or 11 o'clock, or you might have had, I think we had a couple of days where we finished at, say, even 2 or 3 o'clock. But the point was, if you finished at 3 o'clock, you would quite often have practices to do. You'd have extra projects to do that you had to work on. And so you would be there until 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And the nature of the course was the third years had their final major project, and they would usually, they had to hire actors for it. And what they would normally do is use the second year. So obviously you do your lectures after 5 o'clock. If you're involved in any of these productions, you go and do that. So you'd have rehearsals from, say, 5 until 7 or 6 until 8 or something like that. And if you're involved in multiple productions, they'd normally put a cap on kind of like 2 productions because that's the most you can take on. But
yeah, it could be very demanding on your schedule, couldn't it? If you had to tell one of the directors from one group that you had to go to the other rehearsal, they were not happy bunnies. The other ones were not happy bunnies if you were delayed.
I'd had times where I was involved in 2 productions, and so my lectures would finish at 4 o'clock, and then I have rehearsal for one show at 4 till 6, and then I go straight through to rehearsal for another show 6 till 8.
So you kept on your toes.
Yeah, and then sometimes I'd finish at 8 o'clock and be like, right, I'm off to the gym, and I go to the gym, and then I get back and I cook my dinner at kind of like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, eat my food, and just fall asleep straight in bed and do it all again the next day.
Yeah, get up at silly o'clock, and sometimes there were rehearsals before the lectures started as well.
Oh yeah, no, you'd have a lectures to start at 11 o'clock, and you'd be like, okay, well, we'll all meet up at 9 o'clock to kind of go through the last little bits and little tweaks, because it was for the projects that you're doing for your course and for your lectures. It was just massively full on. And that's why it wasn't a usual university experience. Most people, they do a couple of hours per day, and it doesn't matter if they go to the pub till 3 in the morning because they haven't got a lecture till 2 in the afternoon. If we're at the pub till 3 in the morning, I've still got to be in bright and early, bushy-tailed, for a very physical movement lesson at 9 o'clock. And I'm feeling like my arse is falling out of my head.
What an image.
Because I drunk 8 pints and spent £8 on them the last night.
So you definitely got your money's worth there, because you put the hours in, the lecturers put the hours in, and it was. I mean, obviously, I didn't stick it out to the end because I was even worse at being academically minded than obviously yourself was, because you managed to stick out the 3 years.
I think the difficulty with that is the fact that we had these essays to do. Whereas most university degrees, if you're doing that work, you have your lectures and then the rest of your time is spent writing the essays. Whereas we had these massive full-on days where you're working for 8 to 12 hours per day, when you're supposed to do your essays at the end of the modules or for other stuff, or especially when I got to third year for your dissertation, everything's full on. Where do you find the time for it?
Exactly. And if you've got a part-time job outside of uni.
Yeah. Evenings or weekends. And if you've got a part-time job, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So you spent your 3 years there. What would you say was the best production you were involved in? Because there were lots. There were several every term, weren't there? Or which one meant the most to you? Which one did you work hardest on? Which was the most challenging?
I would say in my second year, I was involved in a production called What the Butler Saw. And I think for me, that's the closest I've come to truly feeling proud of the performance that I managed to give. So
who did you play in this?
So I played the lead role of a chap called Dr. Prentice, and Dr. Prentice, it's a Joe Orton script, so a little bit whimsical, quite farcical, a hell of a fun show to do. There was a lot of kind of like visual gags with hiding certain things. So it's one of those things where everything kind of culminates, and this poor guy who's you feel sorry for, even though he's not particularly a nice person, has to just deal with the absurdity of everything happening at once. So there's a policeman knocking on his door asking about there was a statue of Winston Churchill and somebody had stolen his penis.
Ah, right. The first thing you'd aim for on a Churchill statue.
Yeah, so somebody has stolen poor Winston Churchill's penis. This chap had his wife. He was also having it away with his secretary, and there was a police officer who was coming in to find out about certain things that had happened, and then another detective. So there was these different investigations going on, and everything was just falling apart. And I remember at one point there was this part where I had to hide trousers or some underwear, and I move it from one place to another, and then from one place to another. And it was a very kind of physical piece, and there was a lot of elements of it where you could get lost in the script, where you're doing one bit and you think you're doing a bit that's ahead because there's similarities and stuff like that, and there's a lot of visual jokes and working on stuff. And I had a really cast, and I had a fantastic script, and I felt like it was a performance that kind of took a lot of me. Now, I've never done a lot of drama sort of stuff, and one thing I do regret, I tended to go for comedy sort of scripts because I enjoyed playing them. It's one of those things, I enjoy making people laugh, and I enjoy bringing lightness and levity into the world. Yeah, I feel like with some production, I felt like I've done good performances, but I don't know if you felt this when you were at college, like when you've got, how can I say this without sounding really big-headed?
Say what you need to. Say what's in your heart, Ben.
Oh, in my heart. I hate everyone. I hate them so much. When you've got like more of a mixed ability group, you tend to get this more at kind of GCSE level, and then sometimes at college, but even degree, you get some people who struggle with, depending on the style of the script or the performance they're being asked to give, if it's outside of their usual comfort zone. Sometimes you can feel that you might have weaker cast members who bring the overall production down. And it was one of those few shows where I felt like there were no kind of like weak links within the cast, and the script kind of like really worked for me, and I felt like it took a lot from me, and I felt like it was a really good performance we did. It was a really good show, and I was 100% proud of it. And
those kind of performances where you feel like that, where you feel like every box has been ticked for you, they come along once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're quite special when they do come along. It's interesting you say that you quite like to bring joy and laughter and whatnot, but then moving away from university, you've now gone on to your stories, and they definitely straight out of the vein of Edgar Allan Poe, that kind of thing.
As I was saying it, I thought you were going to bring this up. I know he's going to happen like, well,
this is going to come out and bite you in the ass.
Yes.
So first of all, where did that change occur? When did it? So you went from wanting to go from the RAF, then you changed trajectory and went into uni to do acting, and now at this end of it, you've started writing stories.
Yes. So I think through the main change happened for me at the first year of university. So we had these these Add Plus Vantage modules, where it's basically, I think it was only during your first year, but you chose one module and you did it for a term. It was something that was outside of your course material. It was an idea, it was a way to kind of explore other parts of what the university had to offer. I chose creative writing. So I'd fallen in love with writing a little bit at college, where and we did have a script writing module that we had to do, and I really kind of like relished that. And I did the creative writing module, and I realized kind of how much joy it brought me to kind of create this. And at one point we had to do this short story, and a wonderful woman called Mez Packer, who works at the university, who's also a published author, said that the work that I did, that it read more like a script than a story. And I think at that point, because I was a theatre graduate, or a theatre person, undergraduate, the way my brain worked was very much in a script sort of base. It was all dialogue. It was things being said rather than stuff happening. There was a lot of back and forth dialogue with it. And I kind of fell in love with it there. And I found that we'd create stuff on the, write the first draft on its feet. And I would go away and write that, and I would kind of tweak certain bits, and I think about how we wanted to word it and things like that. And I've always been very much kind of, what word's going to work here? It's not just a case of, oh, this word is what immediately comes to mind. It's like, what word can I use that evokes the right feeling? And then when I left university, I moved to Reading, and I went straight into a work environment. And so the theatre kind of like came out of my life a little bit. I needed that creative outlet. And what I ended up finding myself doing while I was, my first job was, I was a car park supervisor. I literally checking the machines, having to give the occasional. I did very little ticket giving. I did not care for that job one iota. But as much as I hated the job and having to walk around in this bright blue outfit with my ticket machine and people looking at you like you're scum, because I was so lazy, essentially, if it was bad weather, if it was raining, I was like, well, it's raining. I can't go out and give people tickets because the printed paper is really fragile. As soon as it gets any rain on it, it'll fall apart. It's mush. It'll just dissolve in my hand, and then it won't stick to the windscreen. So
brilliant.
Because I did so little work, I had so much time with my notebook that I kept with me to just write. And as ideas came to me, I made notes and I did stuff. And one of the short stories, so my original short stories that I first published, I did one called The Prison Without Time, and the other one was the Last Journey of Henry Westfield, I think I called him. That last journey, I wrote about half of that story in a car park, in my car, whilst it was absolutely chucking it down with rain, because I was sat there. It was a miserable kind of Friday afternoon. It was 3 o'clock. It was chucking it down, and I just had these thoughts about this rain, and it kind of, that's where we start the story, is that torrential downpour. That's something sinister that's different about the rain. And it kind of, I just wrote stuff down, and I had this notebook that was full of stuff that I started to write that became nothing, but I had the opportunity to sit and to write. And I think that's where I fell in love with it a little bit more. During that first year where I did that job, I had the time and the ability to let my mind wander. And if something came to my head, I just go over into a corner and get my notebook out and just write stuff down. And that's where the writing kind of started to flourish. So that was kind of 2015, 2016, I started writing some stuff. And it was, as I published it, it was my now ex-wife who actually kind of pushed me and believed in me, that she thought the writing was good and had read through this stuff. And I was saying that I was going to maybe apply for some of these short story writing competitions or something. And then she was just like, just publish it. Like, you can put it on Kindle, you can just put it out there and publish it yourself, and then it's there. It's a thought that had never occurred to me, but she had so much faith and belief in what I could do and the quality of what I'd done, that she kind of pushed me to kind of see beyond my own kind of limitations that I'd imposed on myself. But the reception was there, and it was more, I'd done it for myself, that I put the work out there for anyone to see. And that was kind of the real spark of kind of like, okay, I've done some short stories. They're like a couple thousand words, and I've put those out. And then I started working on longer stuff. My second short story that I did, or the third one, was 5,000 or 6,000 words. And then I worked on my novelette, which was kind of 24,000 words. And when I finally put that out during kind of towards the end of lockdown, where I was going through a lot of personal stuff, and I needed to focus on something. And I think it was very cathartic, kind of finishing that story where I'd worked on it for about a year. As I was coming to terms with that, kind of like, it's lockdown, I've had to move away from Reading back to home. I'm having to kind of reset my life from where kind of like that relationship had fallen apart. And having that to focus in on was massively, massively helpful.
That was your personal sort of crutch during lockdown, because obviously lockdown's been an absolute bitch for loads of people.
Yeah. And it's very weird, because the story that I'd written was very much set in kind of like winter sort of time. And I started writing it in winter. And obviously, as I was finishing writing it, we had this fantastic spring into summer, and it was beautiful, glorious weather. And I was there kind of like in the back room with the curtains closed and a whiskey in hand, just kind of like typing over this desk, just going, oh, it's cold and dark in here, isn't it? And I was there just in the house on my own with like music playing, getting through far too much whiskey and rum of a day, just kind of going, I'll just type this bit out. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was both cathartic and slightly sadomasochistic. Which is writing, isn't it? That's cathartic and masochistic, and that's how we do.
I'll take your word for that.
My liver took a hell of a pounding during that writing process, but damn it, I got it finished, and it's the longest thing I've ever written, and I was quite proud of it.
Yeah, so this last one was Beneath the Cobbled Streets?
It was indeed, based on a joke from university.
I was going to bring this up because I remember when you released, was it your? It might have been this one, because there was Steve, who we went to uni together. He made a comment saying you love the cobbles. What's that about?
I don't think there was any mention of cobbles in the other stories, but I put the two short stories out there, and he'd asked about if there was going to be any cobbles. So I think it must have been in like second year. We did this. We got put into these large groups for. To create this, just some sort of creative piece. I can't remember what it was. We decided to call ourselves, it basically ended up as being most of the guys on the course were all in one group together. We called ourselves Judicium. Technically, should have been pronounced Judicium, I believe, because it was basically from the Latin for justice. But when you get 8 or 9 theatre guys together who are all deeply sarcastic and can't help but take the mick out of each other, I think at one point I'd said something about a visual thing of seeing wheels on cobblestones or horses on cobblestones. And I think I've mentioned that, and then I didn't think they'd heard, or I mentioned it again kind of shortly afterwards, and that became a running joke of Ben and the fucking cobblestone. Like I had some like weird sexual urge about cobbles or something like that.
Bet you love Coronation Street.
Like it was a weird running joke that came out of nowhere, but it just kind of stuck. And when I put those first stories out, Steve had said about, are there any cobbles in? And I was like, sadly not, but I will write one just for you. The start of this story was just going to be a short story, and it was literally kind of like when I first wrote the start of that, I was out walking the dog. And I had this image in my head as I was walking along, and I could hear my shoes kind of like clicking and echoing in the quiet night. It was pitch black. It was a little bit misty and drizzly, and it just kind of evoked something in me. And I got in and just started writing stuff down. And that's that intro passage. And I just thought, I'm doing cobbles. Originally, the plan was going to be was that it was very much kind of based on an H.P. Lovecraft story that I think was called Beneath the Pyramids or Beneath the Pharaohs or something like that. But it was written about Harry Houdini, and that he had gone down beneath these pharaohs, and he saw this huge thick creature, and he couldn't figure out what it was. And the moment of madness of understanding was realizing that it wasn't a creature that he was seeing the paw of the creature. And that idea of, you think you've got one thing, but what you're seeing is just one part of a greater thing. And I think what I'd originally planned was for the the cobbles to feel like some sort of creature or something like that. But what it actually was this village was built on these cobbles, and the cobbles were just like the scales of this ginormous creature underground. But that kind of morphed into kind of ethereal and kind of hard to break down when they're just kind of a big monster. But I still kind of liked the idea of just writing a horror story about cobbles just for Steve. Whether he's read it or not, I don't know, but it's all about cobbles.
So you mentioned H.P. Lovecraft. Who else would you say is sort of writing influences? Because personally, I read a lot of Stephen King, and I've highlighted
a little section.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and I just thought that is so Stephen King, if I may read it out, is like, every feature on that previously frozen face seemed to refract and merge and splinter with each other, creating a kaleidoscope of horror whilst retaining its perfectly normal appearance. I mean, that's like, because Stephen King is amazing at writing things that you cannot visualize. It's literally impossible to visualize, but you get it. And that's exactly the thing I picked up with that. So, how do things like that get in your head?
I think it's one of the beautiful quirks of the medium of writing, and I think that's why, to a certain extent, Stephen King has never been happy with the adaptations, or many of the adaptations that have been done of some of his work, especially when you talk more about the supernatural stuff, because there's something you can create with the written word that you can't do with the visual media. And so, obviously, famously, he didn't like the version of The Shining. Now, I think The Shining is a fantastic film. It's not necessarily a good adaptation, but Kubrick created it as a film first. I think he wasn't trying to adapt it. He was trying to create a good film, and that shone through because he worked within his medium, and Stephen King works within his. And you can leave a lot to the imagination. I feel like, for me, when I obsess over kind of what words to use and what words not to use, I think about what feeling the words evoke in me. I've literally had times where I've stopped writing for about half an hour because I've used a specific adjective, and I was just like, technically it's what I want to say, but it doesn't feel right. Like the mood that word creates is not correct. And I think that's the thing, is you get a lot of words that mean the same thing. By using one rather than the other, you end up with it creates the ambience of the piece and the mood, and it evokes certain things. And whether it evokes in my reader the same thing that evokes in me as the writer is luck of the draw. I'm very specific in what words I choose as I think about certain things, and I think that's the craft, isn't it? Your craft is the written word, and you have a huge amount of words to use. There's big, enormous, colossal, like they all essentially mean the same thing, but specific choice of words that I think comes with it. And I think I get a lot of that almost to a extent from H.P. Lovecraft, where he was or is kind of famous for using certain words, and they're seen as Lovecraftian, and it's that cosmic horror genre. He tends to use eldritch is a word that is 100% his, and his work is referred to as eldritch horror, and there's certain words that he uses a lot of. I mean, he was a writer that wrote in kind of like the early 1900s, talking 1910s, 1920s into the sort of early 30s, but he wrote the words he used were very much from kind of the late 1800s. He was out of his time in that sense. And it makes him quite a difficult read, especially considering it's short stories, but they're very dense, and the words are used, but they're magnificent. Once you take the time to kind of fall in love with it and pick it apart, the words he uses evoke something. Like, even if you don't know what the word means, I'm one of those people, if I'm reading along and I see a word I don't understand, I have to stop and I have to Google what the dictionary definition is, because I need to know stuff.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the Kindle. Thankfully, it's got the little... You
just press and hold it, and it comes up with the definition.
Beautiful. It's what I think. Yeah, I completely agree with what you mean, because I also read quite a bit of Charles Dickens, and it's obviously that's a hell of a completely opposite end of the scale to King and Lovecraft, but it's just the use of the English language.
Yeah. See, I've got my collection of Dickens. I still haven't made much of a dent in it at the moment, and I am
I would highly recommend it.
It's work. It's almost feels like when you start reading these more kind of classic literature. I mean, he wasn't literature of his time. He was pop classic. He's the equivalent of kind of J.K. Rowling or J.K. Rowling these days. But the style of language makes it a little bit more difficult. It's not an easy bedtime read. You have to give yourself over to your energy to reading and understanding it.
It is so much more satisfying as well. Just to know that amount of effort has gone into a sentence, rather than just like he walked down the street and it was cold.
I think that's the thing, is you can tell that it's the love of the language that you get from writers, where you can tell they've structured this. The words have been picked in such a way. It's not like reading a book where, you know, it's just this happens, this happens, this happens. Like there's more thought put into it than just kind of, this is the story, I dump it out. It's how it's said, how it's presented, and it's that kind of level of stuff. And I think that's the thing that is so much more, especially with the books that I read, so much more enjoyable about them, is that there's that thought in there. There's people that are lovers of their craft, in the same way that when you watch a film that or even a theatre production of a theatre is one of the things, you don't tend to get cheap and easy theatre. Theatre is almost universally created by people who are lovers of their craft. You might throw a question mark over some of the musicals that are out there. The people involved in it, they are lovers of their craft, and it comes along. There is people who know their stuff. There are some writers who just write and churn stuff out, and as a work that is kind of like birthed from your heart and your soul, and it's part of who you are. And I think that's the thing, when you're in the creative world, it's all about, part of you is always intrinsically attached to what you've created. If it's truly matters to you and is meaningful, it's always a part of you, because you give part of yourself to that, because that creative outlet is so much part of who you are as a person. And I think there's certain works that do that, and I always feel that reading Stephen King stuff.
No, that's nice. That's a nice way of looking at it. I think that'll be a nice place to end it, if that's all right. I hope you don't mind.
Yeah, all right. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I'm a narcissist. I love talking about myself. So by all means, if you need me back, I'll talk about it. We could have a 3-way interview.
But no, it has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate your time.
But yeah, thank you very much for having me. I did thoroughly enjoy it, and you can have me again anytime.
You've been listening to #Performing Arts, a Dumber Archangel Sounds production. Produced and edited by John Ellis Benton. Music by Aaron Crowder. Next time.
And as we're up there, and we spot David Tennant in the...
and Greg Doran. Greg Doran was there.
No. Greg Doran's tried to speak to you, and you fobbed him off.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was.
It was just this...
I was picking some... Like, they had this really posh food, like, I don't know, it was like a caviar jam tart or something. And he was just like, oh, you want to try them? They're ever so nice. And I was like, all right, thanks. Why are you telling me what to eat? I had no idea who it was.
Context for people who don't know, Greg Doran is the artistic director of the RSC, the biggest theatres in the company.
Yeah, and I was just like, yeah, cheers, Hagrid, go away.
Dumber Archangel.